Okay, so you've got 10 seconds. Pick one of the following: Further Fifth and You and I. Can't choose? Well, that's the problem. Let's take a deeper look at this problem. So that opening challenge cuts right to the core of a debate that has smouldered for decades in record shops, Facebook comment threads, Reddit forums, and pub arguments. For fans of progressive rock, especially those raised in the golden age of the 70s, this isn't a trivial exercise. Oh no, it's a musical crossroads between two towering monuments of the genre. Genesis is Selling England by the Pound, and Yes's Close to the Edge. Both albums have been inspired, created fierce loyalty, endless praise, and detailed dissection. But asking which one earns the title of Prog's ultimate album isn't about nostalgia or blind fandom. It's about understanding how each one shaped and reflected the high watermark of progressive rock, and how they differ in style, ambition, and execution. So, by 1972, Yes had already released the Yes album and Fragile, gradually refining a sound that fused classical ideas, rock instrumentation, and an almost spiritual level of ambition. With Close to the Edge, they doubled down on the complexity and grandeur. The title track alone stretches over 18 minutes and occupies an entire side of the record. Genesis, on the other hand, was still gathering momentum. Foxtrot had brought them acclaim, but Selling England by the Pound marked their creative high point before the cracks started to appear in that classic lineup. Now, both records emerged within a year of each other, yet their methods and moods just couldn't be more different. So let's begin with structure. Close to the Edge is constructed with near religious devotion to theme, variation, and return. John Anderson's lyrics really often drift into abstraction, but the music, largely composed by Steve Howe for Squire and John Anderson himself, this follows a tight, cyclical pattern. The opening chaos gives way to pastoral calm, then slowly rebuilds into something transcendent and triumphant. Now, Genesis, by contrast, operates more narratively. Selling England by the Pound tells tales. Its lyrics, largely penned by Peter Gabriel and, to a certain extent, Tony Banks, comment on fading British identity, cultural nostalgia, and class tensions. Each song stands on its own, but recurring musical motifs, such as Banks's piano phrasing or Hackett's classical-influenced guitar runs, and add a sense of cohesion. Now, while Yes aimed for spiritual elevation, Genesis leant towards satire, storytelling, and really a touch of melancholy. Now, the tracks Further Fifth and You and I are probably arguably the centerpieces of their respective records. Comparing them is like comparing a Turner landscape to a Monet. They're both magnificent, but grounded in different instincts. Further Fifth opens with one of the most beautiful piano intros, written by Tony Banks and based on classical structures. Then it moves through lyrical passages before arriving at Steve Hackett's guitar solo. Easily one of the most emotional in rock history. It doesn't scream, it just sings. And You and I, meanwhile, feels like a meditation. It unfolds patiently, almost hesitantly. Steve Howe's use of a 12-string guitar combined with Anderson's later vocals, his phrasing, and Squire's bass harmonics create really a sense of expanding space. This music is designed to make time feel irrelevant. Now, what separates them is that Genesis piece invites reflection, whereas Yes pulls you outward, like a sermon whispered through a cathedral walls. Now, both albums exhibit expert musicianship, but where Close to the Edge often feels like an exercise in pushing limits, tempo changes, or time signatures, harmonic risks, Selling England takes a more calculated approach. It's not afraid to settle into simplicity when the narrative demands it. More Fool Me may divide fans, but its inclusion gives the record space to breathe, just as the Battle of Epping Forest, bloated as it may seem, shows Gabriel at his theatrical peak. Chris Welsh, writing for Melody Maker in the 70s, noted that yes, at a level of musical communication that goes really beyond technique, while Genesis used structure and drama to lure you in quietly before cutting straight through to the heart. I think that contrast still holds. But it's lyrically, this is where the albums probably depart most clearly. John Anderson's words on Close to the Edge resist literal interpretation. A season which could call you from the depths of your disgrace. It's beautiful, it's poetic, but it's elusive. In contrast, Selling England by the Pound deals in distinctly British references. The song Dancing with the Moonlight Night riffs on commercial slogans and historic allusions. The Battle of Epping Forest exaggerates gangland conflict in its satire. Gabriel's delivery adds theatricality and precision. You feel the sneer, the wit, the sadness. That rootedness in place and time gives Genesis' work clarity that, yes, often lacks. But it's not necessarily better, it just serves a different function. Whereas Genesis wants you to observe, yes, want you to feel. Now, produced by Eddie Offord, Close to the Edge has a lush, sometimes chaotic quality with thick mixes and layers that blur the edges of the sound. It invites repeated listening because it doesn't reveal everything immediately. Selling England by the Pound was produced by John Burns and the band, and this is much sharper. Tony Banks's keyboards are more prominent, the guitar's more measured. It's less aggressive, but arguably, perhaps, more consistent. Now, with regards to legacy of influence, this is a really tight contest. Close to the Edge is often hailed as the prog rock album. Rolling Stones included it in their 500 greatest albums of all time, and it's frequently cited by artists as wide-ranging as Geddy Lee and Mikkel Akkerfeld. But Selling England by the Pound also has its champions. Phil Collins called it the band's finest hour. It was a major influence on artists like Marillion and IQ, who built much of the 1980s neo-prog movement around its tone and structure. Now, even John Lennon once called Genesis one of the bands that's doing something interesting. Now, to reach a fair verdict, we must consider some of the weaknesses. Close to the Edge can feel a little bit overstuffed. That title track, although it's iconic, it's so dense it can be off-putting to newcomers. Siberian True, while energetic, feels like a bit of a lesser track compared to the majesty that precedes it. Selling England has its pacing issues too. The Battle of Epping Forest, for all its ambition, is perhaps overlong and suffers from lyrics that perhaps overwhelm the melody. And after the ordeal, has long divided fans over its place in the flow. So which then is Prog's ultimate album? Well, this depends entirely on how you define the apex of progressive rock. Now, if you measure in ambition, complexity and risk, Close to the Edge probably takes the crown. It's the album that really dares most and cares least about accessibility. It's immense, intense, and quite often euphoric. But if you value emotional depth, lyrical intelligence and narrative strength, Selling England by the Pound edges ahead. It might not aim as high in technical terms, but it strikes a deeper emotional chord, especially for those listeners with a connection to British culture or an ear for storytelling. Ultimately, the answer to this conundrum isn't binary. If Close to the Edge is a cathedral built from sound and spirit, then Selling England by the Pound is a stage play, layered, biting and strangely moving. Both have earned their place in the canon, but for sheer accessibility without sacrificing ambition, Genesis may have created something that resonates longer with a wider audience. Still, ask a musician, especially one who grew up with a Strat in their lap and a copy of Guitar Player on the nightstand, and you'll hear awe in their voice. But when they say, but man, close to the edge. So here's the verdict. Close to the edge is Prog's boldest statement. Selling England by the pound is Prog's most complete experience. Which one's ultimate? Now that depends on which part of you is listening. I can't decide that. But what you can do is tell me in the comments your thoughts on these two masterpieces. And if you have a clear winner from the two, let me know. Also, if you've enjoyed the video, share some love with me and the YouTube algorithm and hit that like button for me, if you will, and just spend a few moments in the description section where there is additional information on where to buy both of these absolute masterpieces and how to support the channel should you wish. Go on, you know you want to buy me a coffee. Now, both of these bands featured in a video I shot charting the origins of the 6 of the biggest bands in progressive rock music. That's the video I want you to watch next, and I'll see you over there.